Okay, welcome to Telling Your Career Story, Resume Writing for Career Transitions. Please note that this session will be offered in English. To begin, I would like to state by acknowledging that I am here on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples here in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land that you are on as well. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. This session will be recorded and then published to the FYN's YouTube channel, so you can go back to check out the recordings and the insights at a later date. We would also like to note that the PowerPoint presentations for each session is included on our wiki page so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. All the resources shared during this session will be added to our wiki page under resources. Hi there, my name is Matt Nguyen, and I will be your moderator for this session. Very short bio from me. As you can see there, it's expanded more into detail, but I've been working with the Federal Public Service for almost a decade now. Spent the first 5 years at the Public Service Pay Center. And then I took a deployment out to where I am now at Natural Resources as a compensation liaison officer. Before we get started, we do have a couple of quick polling questions. This is not a test, and participation is not mandatory. So we can begin with the first question. Has your position been affected as a result of fiscal restraints? So there's a few options there. Yes, my term is ending. Yes, my position was workforce adjusted. No, or I don't know. The second question, how are you currently feeling about your resume? A few options there as well. I don't have one ready yet. I have a resume, but it needs significant updating. I've updated it, but I'm not confident it will tell my story well. I feel mostly confident, just looking to refine it, or I feel very confident and I am here to validate my approach. So we'll give about 30, 60 seconds to get some votes in, and then we'll take a look at the results. All right, so the results are in. And so for the first question, if your position has been affected, looks like we have almost half, so 48% have said no. But then there is approximately another 12 and 29% that said yes in some way, whether their term is ending or they've actually been subjected to the WFA. And then looking at the second question, how do you all feel about your resume presently? Pretty close between I have a resume but needs significant updating. I've updated it, but I'm not confident it will tell my story well. And then I feel mostly confident just looking to refine it. Okay, so here are the learning objectives for today's session. To begin, it's meant to learn effective resume writing strategies for both GC jobs and informal processes. Understanding how to structure a modern, impact-focused resume that highlights results and transferable skills. Reframing your resume as a storytelling tool that clearly communicates your value beyond a list of roles and responsibilities. And finally, to learn how to navigate telling your career story with confidence while being mindful of self-care during times of change and uncertainty. So now I would like to introduce Joshua Frame, the National Chair of the FYN, who will provide some opening remarks. Josh, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Matthew. So I'm Joshua Frame. I'm National Chair of the Federal Youth Network. I am joining you today from Victoria, BC, the unceded ancestral territory of the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich First Nations. So happy to join you from this territory, and happy to avoid some snow for a few days, getting away from Ottawa. I started my career in 2009, so about almost 17 years ago, 16 and a half years ago, and worked in CRA and in various things. And the uniting factor throughout my career has really been young professionals networks. So as soon as I started in CRA, I got involved in the CRA YPN, and throughout my time, that's really been a driver of passion projects and leading to full-time work after I was workforce adjusted in 2015. So there are lots of ways that whether it's workforce adjustment or other changes, it can lead to something positive. It's obviously not always the case, but there are ways to do that. So today, so if we can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about resumes and during career transitions. So based on your polling, about 40% of you are either affected by a term reduction or a direct workforce adjustment, and about 60% of you are not right now. But I think what we're going to see generally across the GC is a lot of changes, a lot of movement. When we get a new government in, when we have an election, we get new government priorities. We get things that are no longer as important to a new government as they were for the previous government, and different things that are now incredibly important for a new government that were not as prioritized previously. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I think we're going to see more and more of that over the next few years. Obviously, the landscape of what's happening across the world and across Canada is changing daily. And hopefully, try to be conscious of your own mental health and don't watch the news too much, because it's a bit of a roller coaster these days. But I think what we're seeing across departments, reduced departmental staffing, we're seeing reductions in term and casual contracts, specifically in terms of term hiring that really peaked in like 2023, 2024, and was at an all-time high. And has started coming down as people start to look at their budgets and see what they have in terms of spending for each year. We've seen reductions in student hiring. So at the FYN, we run a student network called GC Students, and certainly the take-up for that programming has been reduced, but is still there. There are still folks who are hiring students, but not in the same numbers that they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And then, if you are paying attention to the news or you are directly impacted by a workforce adjustment, then you have seen the number of announcements from across dozens of government departments. Some have not announced workforce adjustment yet, but most have if they have impacts. And those announcements hopefully have kind of crested, and we aren't going to see a lot more announcements over the next 6 months. But it's also possible. These are continually changing priorities. So how can you clearly communicate your strengths, your impact, your potential as you navigate this period of change and uncertainty? So that's what we're going to go through today. And we have some very talented facilitators who are going to take us through that content, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. Next slide, please. So start off by acknowledging your feelings. It's normal to have a whole range of emotions, from anxiety to sadness. And just to be clear, there are feelings other than anxiety and sadness. It might not be as negative for you. You might have expected it. I will say when I got a announcement or a call from my assistant director to show up at the office tomorrow, when I had been on secondment for almost a year, I knew what was going to happen. I knew we were going to go into a meeting to announce workforce adjustment. I had seen the writing on the wall. That was part of my reason for seeking a secondment and kind of gaining experience outside of that area. But lots of people hadn't. So, there's a whole range of emotion that happened in that room. And it disrupts you personally. But it is not because of you personally. You are not getting a workforce adjustment notice or a reduction in a term contract because of something that you did. but allow yourself time to feel all of these emotions, and to take in the news, without judgment, without a negative self story of, what could I have done differently? Because the reality is you couldn't have done anything differently. These decisions are made at higher levels. It's about the workload. It's not about the worker, but it does impact the worker. Reach out to friends, family, and colleagues. Talk about your concerns. They can provide emotional support, help you feel less isolated. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, which is entirely justifiable in this situation, consider reaching out to the Employee Assistance Program. They can provide strategies to cope with stress and anxiety. The EAP program is limited to generally 5 meetings per issue. So also consider, this might be a long-term situation until if you're trying to look for a new position, your position's affected. So think about seeking out psychological services that are covered by our health plan. There are really good coverages for that. That was not the case 10 years ago. And that can provide you with some long-term support. To some extent, like a workforce adjustment announcement, a reduction of a term contract, or just everything going on in the world, and everything going on in the GC today can really shake you to your core. So that is entirely justified. And don't isolate yourself. Reach out to colleagues. Determine if counseling is a good idea for you. I know I've gone through it on multiple occasions, and it's been incredibly helpful. I went through it when I was going through a workforce adjustment process, and it really helped me kind of ground into my values and figure out my next steps. What was I trying to focus my career on in the future? How could I kind of learn from this experience? So lots of options there. All right. So with that, I will now hand off to Alexa, who's going to talk about reframing your resume. Okay, Alexa, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh. And thanks everybody for having me. Just to give a quick introduction, my name is Alexa Gallant, and I'm actually joining from outside of the Government of Canada. I currently am employed by an insurance company, Prince Edward Island. I'm the Manager of Finance and Administration for PEI Mutual Insurance Company. And prior to that, I was a public accountant. I worked at Grant Thornton, which is a multinational accounting firm. I worked my way up to senior manager there before departing in 2022. So I have about 6 or so years combined HR, recruitment, retention, and kind of people management skills backing me here. And I just want to start before I get into my presentation to acknowledge that I am joining from Prince Edward Island, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nations. So I'm going to kind of talk about reframing the resume, and we can get to the first slide here. So I'm just going to basically, from a high level, kind of talk about what we're looking for as hiring managers in the modern resume. So before I kind of jump into the nitty gritty details, I always like to take a step back and look at the big picture. What is a resume? What are we trying to achieve? Sometimes we get so anxious and excited to get our resume out the door, we kind of forget to take this step back and look at the big picture. So traditionally, our resume was basically just a tool used by job seekers where we'd list places of employment, different dates, duties, skills, education, maybe some volunteer work. Essentially, we were just creating a giant checklist that hiring managers could quickly scan and determine eligibility. But today we're in such a competitive market, we need to reframe the way we think about this. We need to have our resume tell a story. So today our resume needs to be a document that we can use to market ourselves and show hiring managers why we're the right fit for their company or organization. So your resume needs to tell the story of your career, what accomplishments you've made, and what impact that has had. Let your personality shine through the page. Don't be afraid to showcase your talents and take credit for any accomplishments and hard work that you've put into this point. Ticking off the boxes of education and qualifications is, of course, important, and it's always going to be necessary to get shortlisted for an interview. But being able to take that document and showcase your personality and how you can positively impact the culture of an organization will help set you apart. Okay, so that's great. A lot of resumes maybe haven't been updated in several years. So I'm not saying we need to completely start from scratch and throw that out the window, but what I am saying is we need to rethink the way we're portraying our skills and ensure that we're creating a document that kind of exhibits the impact that we've had on organizations. So to succeed in this, let's first start by taking a look at what hiring managers are looking for. So I want everyone to take a second and just think about the best place they've ever worked, whether that's a company, organization, department, whatever it may be. What was it that made that place great? Was it the job task listing, the hours, the pay, the benefits, the physical space, or was it the people? So for me, the people always make the difference. The people can turn a hectic morning where you barely get out the door and into the office on time, they can turn that into a great day, or they can have the opposite impact. So as a hiring manager, what I'm always looking for is easy. I want people who can add to the culture of a workplace. Those hard skills, those tick boxes, they can all be taught through training, through education. We can fill any gaps. But what we can't do is teach you how you choose to impact the people around you. So I'm not discounting those hard skills. It's always going to be important. But in a competitive market where there's lots of applicants who may have the same skill set you do, the same education background, we need to showcase your personality and how you're going to add to the culture of a workplace. It might be kind of hard to believe that organizations are this focused on their culture. It's a bit of a wishy-washy term, culture. We want to have a positive culture. And to be completely honest with everybody, it's not just because we want everybody to feel good and we want to be a great place to work. That's amazing. Those are bonuses. But at the end of the day, recruitment and retention is also a really, really high cost of doing business. It's very expensive for organizations to do repetitively. So when we find great people that fit and complement the culture that we're trying to achieve, we want to keep those people. So it's organizational performance from all levels. So how do we showcase our personality on paper, on a 2 to 3 page document? What we need to do is think of our resume as a story and kind of try to adapt a story framework for our resume. So what's a story framework? So I literally think of it as a story. We're going to tell the story of our career. And every great story has a great introduction. So you pick up a new book. There's always like that moment in the first couple of chapters where you're hooked. You want to keep reading. On your resume, chapter 1 is going to be your professional summary. Your professional summary is going to frame who you are professionally, what problems you solve, your key strengths, the impact you've made with your experience, and where that experience is going to lead you. It's going to basically show what value you can bring to an employer. So I have 2 statements up on the slides. One is kind of the traditional approach to the start of a resume where you would say your objective statement. The second is kind of reframing that objective statement under this, I'll say, story framework. So the traditional approach, we're telling the hiring manager, what do I want? The second approach is telling the hiring manager, what can I do for you? How can I add value? Which person would you want to have on your team? For me, it would be the second person, the one who is proving to take initiative and show what they can do to add to the business or to the organization. So following the professional summary, we have to actually create our resume. So we need to build the layout and continue to further market ourselves. So to build the layout, I'm not going to kind of touch on the traditional approach. There's lots of kind of overlapping themes between the two, but basically what we want to do is we want to build the layout of our resume to showcase our identity, our skills and strengths, what experience we have, what achievements we've had, what our growth in education is, and even what our next steps are. So to even think of that simpler, what you want to accomplish at the end of the day when you're done with your resume, you want to clearly explain who you are, what you're good at, what you've done, and why that matters. We've covered off who you are with our professional summary. So let's kind of briefly touch on each of these other headings. So if we're talking about our skills and strengths, what you're good at, this is your opportunity to showcase the skills and strengths you've achieved up to this point in your career. What are your core capabilities? Highlight what you're good at and be sure to explain to the reader what difference that has made. Your experience, this is kind of the substance of the story. This is where you're going to tell the reader about your career journey, your opportunity to showcase your professional development, It's really important in this section to not just list out different tasks, different duties. It's important to highlight the role that you've played, what challenges you've handled, and what results you delivered, really showing your impact. And I know there's some really great examples of how to reframe this further on in the presentation. The achievements section of your resume. So this is your chance to identify any additional career highlights that maybe aren't covered off in the first two. Maybe you won an award or you implemented a change in your workplace that had a positive impact. Include that here. This section is really a great opportunity for you to showcase moments where those softer skills and your personality can be on full display. And then finally, education sections. So this is where we can kind of make sure we are ticking those boxes of qualifications, the hard skills that we need to have the different educational training or degrees, whatever it might be for a specific role that you're looking for. Showcasing your education and your professional development will help to tell the story of how you've grown to come to this point in your career. So a strong resume, it's subtly going to answer the question of what's next for this person. Where is this person going? The highlights of your experience and skills, it should point to the next logical step in your career. So if you take a step back when you're done your resume, you think about these four questions at the bottom of the screen here. I want to make sure everyone knows that it's got to make sense. The hiring manager, they want to be able to see your career path, see, is it logical? So if you see any gaps when you step back. So maybe you took a year off, you had a mat leave, and then you went into a new position when you came back. Like if there's any obvious gaps, just things like that, it's really important to kind of explain those in either the screening questions or the cover letter, kind of depending on the scenario. Because hiring managers, we like candidates whose story makes sense. Yeah, so next slide. So briefly discussed about how we can modernize our resume. And of course, in a modern world, we have AI, and it is a great tool that can help us to kind of recreate our resume and bring it up to date. Just some quick points around AI. It can help you through technical prompts to revise your writing to be more formal. It can help analyze jobs, identify keywords in those job ads to include in your resume, and even help tailor it to a specific position. It can help update your resume to have stronger statements in it, help turn your career objective into a professional summary, use stronger descriptive words, whatever kind of is applicable to your situation. I would just advise that if you are using AI, it is still so crucial to proofread your resume and ensure it reflects you. The writing needs to be consistent throughout and reflect you as a professional, not just something generic. And it is quite obvious whenever a candidate might submit a generic cover letter or generic kind of AI generated resume qualifications, and it doesn't make a great first impression when there's no kind of personality and personalization to the resume. So I would say that AI is a really great tool that we can use to complement the process, but not to complete it. So I'll just kind of wrap up by saying overall, it's really important to ensure that your resume reflects you, it reflects your story, your career path, and explains the impact that you've had, and how you can continue to positively impact different organizations that you choose to work with going forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Alexa. Hello, my name is Samantha Harris, and I am joining you today from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people in Vancouver. So I'm actually originally from Prince Edward Island, like Alexa, but I moved out to the West Coast in Vancouver about 6 years ago now, and I've been working in the public service ever since. So my background is in communications as an advisor, but I'm currently working with the Federal Youth Network as a learning advisor. On the side of that, I volunteer as a co-chair for GovernX in the past 4 years. So it's been great. I've met so many incredible people in building a community, both within the GC and outside of that. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about resume building and how we can make that communicate your impact. And with that, I believe we have a poll before we dive into the content. So let's look at this first poll. The question is, what feels like the biggest challenge in writing your resume right now? So the first option is translating my current experience for new roles, knowing what to include or leave out, identifying my impact and transferable skills, how to structure a resume while finding a way to stand out, or just getting started at all. Is it difficult to just know where to begin? So we'll give that a couple more seconds just to see, have everyone answer if you'd like. All right. So we have about 21% who say translating their current experience for new roles is kind of where you're struggling, maybe you're looking for help on. Knowing what to include or leave out, about 20%, 27% identifying my impact and transferable skills, 25% on how to structure a resume while finding a way to stand out, and then 7% in just getting started at all. Okay, well, thank you all for that, for participating in that. On that note, we can dive right into the content on considerations for an impact-focused resume. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen this viral meme that has gone around, the LinkedIn versus reality. So on the left side here, we have I stole a sock. And then on the right side, we have this cute husky making a LinkedIn post saying, successfully leveraged a sock acquisition strategy to drive operational efficiencies, excited for future growth opportunities. So while this is cute and funny, it is honestly and genuinely a way that we can consider reframing our resume and how we can sort of market ourselves and show our value. To you, you might have been responsible for a task, but how can you showcase the actions and the impact behind that? So by doing that, I would first consider what is the main goal that you want to communicate in your resume. Instead of simply listing your strengths in the skill section, try to provide specific examples in highlighting and demonstrating those skills through the actions and outcomes in your experience, just like this husky has done in their LinkedIn post. And on that, we'll get into some examples on the next slide. So one way I like to think of this to wrap my head around it is this equation of action plus skill plus outcome. Or another way to think of that is what you did, how you did it, and why that mattered. So instead of saying as a bullet on your resume, responsible for coordinating stakeholder meetings and preparing briefing materials, you could reframe that to be coordinated stakeholder consultations by developing concise briefing materials and supporting informed decision making for policy recommendations. So it's not only what you say, but how you say it that can create impact. So if you're struggling with this, maybe ask yourself what skills were involved in the action that you took, who benefited, and what changed because of your work. That's often where the impact lies. Let's look at another example. On the next slide, please. All right, so in this example, we're including some context. So we're going a step further and giving the hiring manager a bit more of an idea of what was involved, and the context being that number there that all on that Instagram account. So instead of saying responsible for running a Government of Canada social media account, you could say led content planning and day-to-day management of a 200,000 follower Government of Canada Instagram account, strengthening digital engagement and expanding reach for key activities. So in this second example on the right-hand side, it's showing a realistic scope, context, while highlighting leadership and strategy. So it shows why the work mattered and that outcome. And in the next slide, we'll look at including some measurable data. So I just want to highlight that this isn't necessary. And if your role doesn't have, if you don't have access to this sort of statistic to add, that's okay. Don't stress about that. But some roles do. So if it does, if your role does allow you to have performance metrics, you could definitely include that. So instead of saying responsible for monitoring program performance and preparing reports, you could say analyzed program performance data and prepared monthly reports, helping identify process improvements that reduced reporting turnaround time by 25%. So this is showing the action, the skill, and the outcome. So it's really guiding through it is sort of like a mini story. It's guiding the hiring managers through what you did and using keywords like helping identify process improvements. You're stating exactly what your work and skill brought to that team. So on the next slide, we will go over some creative ways to stand out. So this is actually a poster that I made not for a job process, but for a room, actually, new housing a few years ago. So while it wasn't for a job market, it still was a competitive market. I saw a posting for housing that checked all my boxes. It was perfect for me and it was a really good deal. And I knew it would probably check the boxes of many other people. So I wanted to find a way to stand out, to market myself. So in doing that, I decided to create this poster to show my new housemates what value I could bring to them as a new roommate. So that is something that I actually talked to them about after, and in the end, I did get the place, which is amazing, and I've been here since. And they did tell me actually that they had over 100 people apply within just the first 24 hours, but they immediately chose me because I stood out from all the other candidates. I had something different. I was able to showcase my personality and what value I could bring, even if that was just coming into the house with an air fryer. So it's important to highlight that a poster like this should never replace your resume or cover letter, but it could be a good way to supplement your application package if you're applying for a informal job process. Something like this probably wouldn't work. I don't think there's an upload section in the formal GC jobs processes, but if you are partaking in an informal process of sorts, you can definitely use a poster or something else. There's many other platforms you can use too. It doesn't have to be a poster to stand out and market yourself a little bit. So definitely use your best judgment, and yeah, think outside the box. Show your impact, show your value, show your personality. It can be really hard to do virtually and to strangers, hiring managers that have never met you, but there are definitely ways that you can showcase that in a competitive market. And with that, we can go to the next slide. And I will hand it over to Antonia for resumes that stand out. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Samantha. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. I see a lot of you on, which is great to hear because this is definitely a very important topic in this time. So to introduce myself, I am Antonia Macris. I started as a student myself almost 5 years ago in ESDC. I made my way to ECCC, where I am substantively as a manager of corporate learning. And I've recently started a secondment at Correctional Services of Canada as a senior learning advisor, and I have too been affected. So I'm happy to take share my insights on that if there's any questions that come up. But definitely, this is something that allows, I think, everyone to really take a step back and see who they are and how they want to represent that when looking for the next opportunities. I've also been involved with the National Youth Network at Environment and Climate Change Canada. So definitely it's important at this stage in your careers at any stage in your careers later on to always reflect and evolve your resumes as you go in your career in the public service. So we'll start with the next slide, please. All right, so we are jumping in and I will try to make it as brief as possible so we can give you time for questions. Yes, perfect. So right here in terms of types of resumes, we have two different types of visuals that it can be portrayed. On one side, you see a text-based, and the other side, as we've spoken, a bit more of the creative graphic side. Now, it's always important to keep in mind that you still need text-based versions of your resume in order to be able to implement those on the plain text applications on jobs.gc.ca. So we will go to the next slide. All right. So if you attended our Navigating Career Transitions Strategies for Success earlier this month, we talked about using other platforms to get creative with telling your career story. Now, depending on the job that you're applying for, you may want to branch out and find different ways to show your creative side. This shows your personality and is in addition to your skill set. So platforms like Canva have many free, unique resume templates that you could use if you want to add some visuals or a new structure to your resume. Other platforms like Trello and Miro are also good tools to map out your career story visually. But remember to be mindful of your audience. Use your judgment in what type they might prefer, who the hiring manager is, and remain consistent to make sure that it's clean, accessible in terms of documentation, and free of spelling and grammatical errors. You'd be surprised how many we see, how many that it's just the tiny details that do matter. Next slide, please. All right. So, what is your career story? So, I'm sharing a little bit of mine, but we're not going to just visually. We'll get into how, in terms of the structure of how it was mentioned a bit before, but I'm sharing for the purpose of today a stripped down version of my CV as an example. So a very brief version of resume to help demonstrate putting your skills on paper. So let's consider the story framework we discussed earlier. Who are you professionally? What is your career story, and how can you show hiring managers right off the bat what value you bring to their team? Now, it's important to highlight key areas that show them who you are professionally. This includes basic information like language profile, security clearance. This is all foundational, but then it's always important to add that catchy hook in your profile section. So that is where you can paint the picture and adapt your skills to the role that you're looking for. So that's really the meat of it, where in your profile to be able to pull out those skills that do matter and adapt while keeping the rest if some of it is standardized that you want to include. All right, next slide. Making your transferable skills visible. So now transferable skills were mentioned. They are often where people underestimate themselves. These are the skills that move with you throughout your career across roles, across teams, and even sectors. So things like communication, stakeholder engagement, analysis, adaptability. These are highly valued everywhere. And this becomes especially important during periods of workforce adjustment. You might feel like your skills are tied to a specific role or a team. And what happens now if that role or team, if you change? Don't worry. Don't let that stress you out. Your skills don't disappear with that role. They are transferable. And it's important to note that also your skills are not always tied, or they won't always derive from a paid position or a work position in that matter. You can gain valuable expertise and experiences from volunteering and other forms of professional development, and that too holds just as much, if not more emphasis to hiring managers, because they see your interests and your passions, and they'll always be able to see that reflected in what you want to pursue next in your career. Yes. So that would just make you move from, asking yourself, do I have the right job? Do I have the right job title, or what's the job title that I'm looking for, to what have I consistently been trusted to do, and what skills reflect my personality that I have strengths in. So thank you. Yeah. So we move to the next slide. So the impact and value you bring to the team doesn't need to be tied to your employment history. This I've just mentioned, but you can communicate these areas through volunteer work or professional awards. If you've been recognized in any way, large or small, this also is important to include, because it highlights, if you've been formally recognized, it's a great example of your skills in action. And hiring managers have a sense of pulling things and making inferences about what other types of things you're involved in. So gaining valuable experience outside of your main job, highlighting the work that you feel passionate about. And this could include involvement in many different things: functional communities, funded networks, departmental networks within your department, like the youth network that I mentioned at Environment Canada, or interdepartmental networks, such as the Federal Youth Network, and different larger scale cross-departmental initiatives. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're gonna dive very rapid fire for a few slides about tailoring your resume and using the job description as your guide. So this is on the screen is an example of a job posting from GC Jobs for a policy analyst. It is an EC classification, but we can take the language directly from a job posting and use it to strengthen how we describe our experience. Use the key themes at the top of a description because they show you what experiences matter most to highlight. And if you see the before example at the bottom of this slide, it's not incorrect. It's just very too general. It doesn't give too much of it doesn't give the hiring manager the idea of scope of what you did. So the after example includes an aligned, we have aligned the language closely for what the employer might be looking for, just being specific, more aligned, measurable, and try to provide actionable examples that show your results. Next slide, please. All right. Tailoring your resume to a job you want doesn't need to be reflected in your experience or skills section. Building off of our last example, this one's from a resume of an EC6 candidate applying for jobs at level. Her experience in the area is clear. Yes, beyond a list of roles and responsibilities, incorporated concrete examples and expertise in the field throughout the entire resume. So your entire resume is a canvas, if I'm going to leave you with anything, that paint a picture of your career story. So it's up to you to figure out what you want it to say. That's the end of my section. Thanks. Oh, maybe not. I will mention the upcoming workshop, an interview preparation session, which is focusing on translating your career story into clear, compelling interview responses that resonate during periods of change. And that's happening in 2 days, so don't miss it, March 26th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. That's the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. We'll move on to questions from the audience, of which you may use the Q&A function here on Zoom. Please remember that you can vote for the questions you like by using the thumbs up button. I see over the course of the session so far, there's been plenty of votes been spread around through great questions that I see. So let's get straight to it. Panelists, please answer questions as quickly as possible so we can cover as most material as we can. I will ask a question and one panelist will answer. The others can chime in and discuss so long as we keep the conversation moving. Any resources mentioned here will be shared on our wiki page after the event. So let's start off with the top voted question. Traditionally, I was always told that resumes should be no longer than 2 pages to highlight skills, achievements, and over 15 years of professional work experience can be a challenge. Is that still the rule, or is it more flexible? Sorry, just lost the question. Or is it more flexible with the storytelling approach?
Yeah, I could jump in on this. So more flexible. I think getting your experience into 2 pages is pretty difficult. Look at it as a matter of, have I given somebody enough information to evaluate whether I'm a good candidate for the role? If it's an informal search, you're sending them your resume, do they immediately say this person would be a good fit or not? If I would say like prioritize information in the last 10 years, and anything that's more than 10 years old, like it's not going to get you the job today. That you were a newspaper boy, and like I was a newspaper boy back in 1994. That's probably not getting me a lot of hits in terms of that experience now. I'm not going to put that on my resume, put it at length in terms of my activities. But I received a resume a while ago from a colleague who wanted me to circulate it to other people. I was kind of lost. It was 12 pages long. It was covering 15 years worth of experience, and it was exhaustive in detail, but it also kind of said nothing in terms of how that person's experience applied to their next role. So think that through. I would say like a maximum of 3 to 4 pages, unless you have really vast experience. You have, a master's or PhD and publications and all sorts of stuff. Otherwise, 3 to 4 pages is good, and use some of the tools in terms of shortening it. Use AI, use a colleague. Antonio.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that. So I agree too. I think if it's longer, it's okay as long as it shows intention that it was tailored. If it's just a long list, like a, grocery housekeeping list of everything you've done and doesn't look like you did the job of, that you're in it, that you actually care about the role. And my other thing is that you never know what of your experiences that are non-career related that if you can include them if they're relevant, that your hiring manager will pick up on, because they might see something else and they're just very interested in that, and they think they see value in that type of extracurricular work. So don't underestimate what else they might pick up on that you've done. So highlight things that are most relevant, but outside the box as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. For the next question, how do you fit all the information you are talking about into a one-page resume? Or can your resume be longer than a single page?
Yeah, so I think just kind of repeating what we said previously, like I think 3 to 4 pages is kind of the sweet spot. It could be two if you're kind of early career. Definitely, you don't need to keep it to 1 page. You wouldn't be able to describe your experience accurately, your skills, your education, applicable courses, all that sort of stuff. So definitely don't feel like you need to limit it to 1 page. But just as Antonio was saying, like just tailor it to the job that you're applying for.
Perfect. For this question, it speaks about a little bit about what has been discussed so far earlier in the session. Does the advice that was given today apply to the public service as much as it does to the private sector? My experience has been that responses to screening questions are much more important than the resume.
I might quickly jump in here on this one. Thank you. I think that really the screening questions and your resume can go hand in hand. I totally understand that in the formal GC jobs process, it is that copy paste, and you can't put a pretty poster, for example. But what you can do is be intentional with how you're answering those star questions, and those should really relate back to and reflect what your resume is stating. So, yes, you can go into more detail in your screening questions, and we do have a session later this week on the interviewing prep skills that also touches on STAR, the situation, task, action, results, which is typically recommended for the screening questions. But yeah, it is a unique thing to be applying to those formal GC jobs and the plain text copy pasting your resume in there without sort of your own unique formatting that you might have if it was in a Word doc. But really, to me, they go hand in hand, those screening questions, and they can just really reflect and expand on what you're highlighting in your resume.
Wonderful. For this next question, I'm going to see if I can call on Alexa. Could you give an example of showing how you impacted the workplace culture within your resume?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually going to give two examples for this, one from kind of like the manager perspective and one from an employee perspective. So starting with myself, I just returned from mat leave actually in January. So when I came back, my team was kind of under someone else's supervision for a year. So I met with everyone individually and got kind of some insights on the last year. And what I learned from them is that communication had kind of fallen off the wayside. So with that, I established new weekly checkpoints for our department, quarterly check-ins with every single individual. So I think if I was to put that on my resume, I wouldn't just say communication skills with my employees. I would say recognized gaps in internal communication, established weekly departmental checkpoints with all members of my team, and quarterly touch points with each member individually to determine, I guess, everybody's kind of well-being. So that's how I would approach that. And just quickly from an employee perspective, and I'm just going to give a shout out to one of my staff. Each year she organizes an Easter egg hunt for the office. Something as simple as that. It doesn't have to necessarily be like some kind of measurable skill. She gets everybody engaged. We do this Easter egg hunt. It's so much fun. It'll be on our social media in a few weeks, I guess, if anyone wants to check. So like stuff like that, she could frame that as took the initiative to organize company-wide event, engaging my colleagues and establishing just better connections throughout the office. So don't just think like straight and narrow, oh, this has to be some kind of measurable event. It can really be anything.
I might just quickly,
Oh,
sorry, I know
go.
we're late on time, but Alexa, that's a great example. And I think just tying back to how you can use AI, for example, if you're struggling to, like Alexa worded that beautifully, taking the Easter egg hunt into how you can make that in a resume bullet. You could even put that into AI if AI is allowed in the process that you're doing, and just say, hey, help me refine this and word it in a way that is impact driven and shows my contribution and outcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to you both. Next question. Can someone here speak to the difference between crafting a resume for the Government of Canada, as they generally want more of a traditional approach, or they ask you to just submit the text in a text box, whereas in the private sector would want something more creative. In addition, how should the skills section be listed? Should it just be list of skills such as MS Word and so on, or do we need to write things out a little bit more?
Sure, I can jump in on this. So I think you can differentiate the process based on are you applying to something on GC Jobs? Are you applying to something through GC Facebook group, LinkedIn, or a more informal process? And I think we talked about that a little bit. That you can have that creativity on the more informal process. The GC Jobs platform does not allow you to, submit a picture, submit a graphic, be more creative. It's really just text, and then you just want to make sure that your text is having the impact that you want to have. And I think in terms of the skills section, you don't need to have a sentence that says like I am very proficient in Microsoft Word and I have more than 15 years of experience using Word. You might want to have if it this is one of the things that's on the job that you're applying for, then you might want to have like software packages and then just list it off. Say, I've used the Adobe Suite, or Adobe Creative Suite, Microsoft Office, including, Word, Excel, blah, blah, blah. You definitely don't need to like kind of spell that out in terms of like sentences about that experience. You can just kind of highlight those skills. And if it's more complicated, if you have extensive experience in video editing, then maybe you want to sort of list off certifications courses, that kind of thing.
Thank you so much, Josh, for your answer. My next question is, how do you quickly and easily adapt a resume to different positions?
I could start off with that. I mean, I think that there's some things that need to be on there no matter what. Like you can't tailor it and just remove a big part of yourself, right? Or some type of education. I think it's more about using different tools that we've shared and other ones as well to to portray how that does benefit the role, even if it's so different. Like myself, I'm very interdisciplinary. I have a background in different disciplines from environment, communications, education, but there's ways to show what you did in those disciplines, even if if you had a different trajectory or a different background, it could still apply to a role if it's not clear cut, I would say. So definitely there's ways to, and people, and I would say hiring managers, it's actually a strength. So finding a way to portray it as a strength but making it make sense on paper and not and you could always speak more to what's on paper. So that's another point I can add, is that if you want to keep it condensed, you want to include some things that you might not think are relevant, but they showcase great skills that you have. You could indicate them minimally, but then when you have the opportunity to speak with them, you could expand more, or sometimes they'll ask you to speak on something, and why was that there? Can you tell me more about what you did? So you'll have other opportunities as well in different iterations of reviews, maybe to speak more on certain things. So don't be shy to include other interdisciplinary assets. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Antonia. I'm just going to quickly move on to the next question, which I think touches on what you just spoke about. In the past, this person has says that they followed the what I did, how I did it result format, but some recruiters or screeners say the responses were too long. How do you balance impact and skill with conciseness?
I can jump in on this one really quick, and I think I'll probably just piggyback off what Sam said. If you're feeling like it might be a little bit too wordy, AI, if it's allowed in the process, is a great tool to kind of help you skim that down, make it concise, and hit on the key points. Another thing I like to do is when you kind of take that step back and review it from a high level, if you're like, should this be included, should it not? Just ask yourself, so what? Okay, I can type 73 words per minute. Okay, so what? Is that applicable to this role? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it is, you want to like clearly be able to explain that. And if it's not, just don't include it. Outside of those, of course, fundamental things Antonia mentioned. But I think that's like kind of a good rule of thumb if you're on the fence about whether or not to include a certain situation scenario. Just ask yourself, does this matter for this role?
Great point, Alexa. Thank you so much for that. All right, last question for the day. Generally, an individual's work is one small piece of a bigger whole. How do we claim impact on something for which we only played a seemingly small part?
I think in short, I statements. So, um, understand like that the work of the team was XYZ, but what were your specific actions that led to the success of the team? So saying that the team accomplished this grand goal doesn't tell me what you did as part of that. Especially in larger teams, like if there's a team of 10 or 12 people, it might have been a great goal that was accomplished and you might have had no part of it. So be very clear about like what was your role? How are you supporting it? How are you adapting? How are you taking on new tasks? How are you working with the team to make sure that that things got accomplished? No matter whether you're the most senior person or the most junior person, just be very clear on like I did the following. Helped to make this all happen. And don't overstate your role. I've seen that on many a process where it sounds as if this person accomplished all of this by themselves on this team of 12. And you can kind of very clearly see that when you're looking through a resume and you're like, oh, that's strange because they're in this like pretty junior or new public servant role, but they're overstating their accomplishments. It's a super big red flag for any hiring manager.
Awesome. Yeah, really great point to bring up, Josh. Thank you so much for that. All right. Well, everyone, you are all such a wealth of knowledge. I know I learned a lot and will definitely look at this recording on the FYN RJFF YouTube page and to check out the podcast series the next time I have questions about this topic. If you do want to know more about any of these topics, please be sure to check out the Career Bootcamp 2026 Wiki resource page. So as we wrap up, I want to come back to something important. For many of you, this isn't just about formatting or bullet points. It's also about navigating change, and sometimes it's the change that you didn't necessarily choose. Your resume is not a verdict on your career, but a tool. It's a strategic, thoughtful way of helping someone else understand the value that you already bring. When you focus on impact, what you did, how you did it, and why it mattered, you make your contributions visible. When you tailor your story with intention, you show alignment. And when you take the time to reflect on your transferable skills, you can begin to see patterns and strengths that may not have been clear to you before. Transitions can feel overwhelming and create uncertainty, but uncertainty does not cancel out your own unique experience. Your career story is still unfolding, and so your resume simply helps open the next chapter. So before we leave for today, we do have one final polling question. The results from this poll will not be shared. It's for the FYN's internal metrics and information. So they want to know, did this workshop meet your needs? Yes, no, I don't know. So while you get your votes in for that, I want to thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to our wonderful audience. And for those who have asked great questions over the course of the day. Like I said, all of the resources mentioned during today's session will be sent to you in a post-event email. In addition, we will send you links to all of our programming, including our in-person learning days, which will be taking place in 25 cities across the country in the spring and fall. As with all of our virtual programming, the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you, and I wish you a great rest of your day.